Hello and welcome to the MRO show presented by Chadwell Supply. I'm your host, Rebecca Wagner. Chadwell Supply is 100% dedicated to the multifamily industry. Your order is on our truck, delivered the next day. You can learn more at chadwellsupply.com. I am here today with
Bert Wray.
Bert. Tell us how you got here.
Oh, like all the way, like a plane or the whole thing?
You can go in as much detail as you'd like.
Oh, wow. Well, the year was Elvis left. No, that is a great question. I love whenever I'm meeting new folks in multifamily. By the way, regional vice president, national accounts, Chadwell Supply. I've been here since 2000, first time 2012, 13, question mark on that. Been a long time. But I got in the industry initially in 2005. Funny, like I grew up my whole life thinking like, apartments is where it's at. That's what I want to do with no, never, never. And what's funny is like very rarely do I meet someone who targeted multifamily as like, that's the industry. And the ones that do come from family, right? They got a mom or dad, somebody that's been in the business. But for me, I was in the military, deployed overseas in 2004, got back early 2005, and was looking for a new line of work, new industry to be in. I was in the fitness industry, trainer, and a client of mine for 6 years was a senior vice president. She's now executive vice president of her management company. And knowing her and hearing the stories, it's funny. Like I always kind of heard the horror stories, and coming back, she hired me into that company. And kind of an odd start. I started as a regional property manager, which it's kind of an interesting way to insert yourself when you know nothing about the business.
Right. You jumped to the top over there.
I jumped in the middle. I didn't know the word multifamily was a word, right? So I started with a 6 property portfolio in Charlotte, North Carolina of affordable housing communities, mostly Section 8. And I walked in knowing that I didn't know anything, right? I knew communication, I knew leadership, and that's for who hired me. She says, you have the things that I can't teach. I'll teach you the multifamily. And she did a great job, poured into it, loved it. And had the opportunity to leave that and join the supplier side. And I've loved literally starting with Chadwell Supply as a territory sales manager. I've never had a bad day at work. And I've never had a Sunday where I didn't look forward to a Monday, and there's something to be said for that. And I've had a great run. Started as a territory sales manager, moved to national accounts, to a director, and now a regional vice president of national accounts, and loving it.
Thank you. Thank you for your service as well. I'm going to kind of dissect a little bit about your background with our topic today. So,
Yeah.
It's no secret that employee retention can be really challenging in any industry, but I definitely feel like in multifamily, it's doubly difficult, if you will. So how do we build strong teams and maintain good people in a high turnover market?
It's a great question. Yeah, turnover really, and for the last couple years, not couple, it feels like COVID or the pandemic was a couple years ago, but word on the street is that was 2020 and we're in 2024. Where does time go? But yes, like every, traveling around nationally, even doing some of the association events with whether it's National Apartment Association or affiliates or NMHC, the biggest issue that's impacting like our customer partners is staffing,
Right.
like finding qualified people to step into the roles to keep their business running. And it's forcing change where they don't necessarily want it. And you hear things like centralization, which is really just a fancy word with how can we do more with fewer.
Mm-hmm.
And there's times that that's effective and that can work. And there's a lot of times that it's not effective and doesn't work. So again, how do you retain the people that you have? How do you've invested in these people within your teams, and it can be very expensive to replace or change how you're doing that. And it all starts within the company. It starts with leadership at the very top, and casting the appropriate vision and mission is essential. And it sounds cliche, right? But we a lot of times as a company, you start a company and you have this folder and you start with, "Oh, I've got to have a great mission." So you jot it down and you put it in your initial business plan. And for some people, that's the last time you revisit it. And we've talked about, how this industry has changed, how companies have changed, and you've got to evaluate your mission on a regular basis and make sure your mission still fits the vision that you have for your company, what's important to your customers and your customers being residents. So that mission has to be constantly evaluated and should evolve as your business changes. And that's the starting point for everything that you do within the company. So that mission, driven down to the most basic entry level
Mhm.
employee, it's just like a groundskeeper, right? That's typically on the maintenance side. That's your starter porter. If that porter doesn't understand the mission of the company, not for the community that he's in, but the company that he's working for, you're missing an opportunity to really capture that employee and put them on a path to achieve, whatever success is available for them. Similar for us in the military, you talk mission, and it's pretty cliche, right? Kind of like Mike Tyson, right? Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. We all had missions that uh, you put hours into mission planning that were just completely trashed in the first 3 or 4 minutes of
Right.
a mission that was going in. So, as an infantry leader in combat, we experienced that a lot. But the one thing you had, and we worked off of these things called op orders, right? Every mission would come down and have an op order. Well, the first thing in the op order was commander's intent. So it's a simple statement that generalizes what we were going to do and how we're going to be successful.
Sort of the goal of that mission.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's what your mission statement as a company should be,
Mhm.
that to generally say, what are we doing and what does it mean to be successful? And everything else comes after that. Your
Mhm.
your goals, your SOPs and standards and all that have to all point to that mission statement. And when you drive that home to the most fundamental of your employees, that's how you create a cohesive team that you're all, we love cliches. So you're all getting in the boat and rowing in the same direction. And when you build that family environment, that cohesiveness, it's harder for people to come in and break that apart,
Right.
right? We're losing. I hear stories all the time, like I'm losing technicians for $1 an hour. Like that's that's a communication problem. That's not a pay rate problem.
Right.
That's someone who doesn't understand the value of the team that they're a part of.
Right.
And it's on us as leaders to make sure we're communicating that value and helping our teammates understand how valuable they are to us and what they're bringing to the table. Um, and another part of that is investment, right? Sometimes we hesitate in investing into our staff because we're accustomed to turnover. So if I invest in you, you're gonna take my investment and go somewhere else and benefit somebody else.
Right.
And what's funny is there's like study after study that shows that investment, like, it anchors loyalty
Mhm.
to the individual.
Absolutely. They're appreciative, they're empowered.
Right.
Yes.
And they feel valued because you give to me that I'm going to give to you. Yet we ignore the evidence backed research and continue to make this kind of knee jerk reaction of like, my money's more important to me, so I've got to hang on to it and not pour into you with it. So, what, that was a really really long answer to your question, but it's
No, it's
like you
great.
you have to invest in your people. One,
Yes.
you've got to invest in the fundamental understanding of why we're all here.
Mhm.
Understand your role, know your role, and and continue to communicate value and show that person, that the role's important. If you don't show it, then the role maybe isn't important and you should be getting rid of it.
So, when you're meeting with these industry partners and multifamily leaders, where are they going now to find their talent?
uh that's a really good question. It's become a really weird time in our world. I mean, I'm hearing things like stay away from the apartment associations because they're just there to like
Poach you.
poach you,
Yeah.
which is nuts to me. And that's the foundationally, that association is there for advocacy and education. Like those are the
Mhm.
two key things that our apartment association exists for.
Mhm.
The two things that's where you want to find people and engage with people, and you want to send your people to learn. But um it's really tough. It's seemingly, especially, like, let's just talk about maintenance. And it's like availability has become way more important than capability. And when you talk about the cost of an employee and the challenges to something like net operating income, when you're bringing someone on board because they're available, like you really stand to compromise a lot of your team at that point, because if that person doesn't have the skills that they conveyed in the interview that they have, it's forcing more responsibility. It's forcing more onto the other team members of that, which now you're putting those team members in jeopardy.
Right.
So, you know, it it matters more to qualify who you're bringing into your team and spend more time on the interview and qualifier than it is to, like, oh, I've just got to have a body. Let's just get them in here, and, like,
Right.
I don't care what they can do or what they can't do. We'll teach them, and then, you
But
know,
actually taking the time to teach them and to invest in them
right?
and how important that
What
is.
does every
Yeah.
hiring manager say to a new employee? I'm not going to throw you to the wolves.
Right.
And then the next thing you do, you open the door and it's a pack of wolves, right? So we have to be better about, and it comes back down to the standards, right? That I have in my business, and making sure that the standards that I've communicated, the mission, vision, the goals,
Mhm.
are more important. And until every person knows every aspect of that, I can't release them into the wild, right? I got to keep the wolves behind the door.
I gotcha. So you've kind of been on both sides of the operations side as well as now the supplier side. And when you're working with these companies, what do you see from the highest performers? What's something they all have in common?
Hmm. I mean, selflessness is probably a big part of it, right? And also the ability to see beyond their role.
Yep. The big
Um,
picture.
yeah, the understanding the big picture, having the foresight and knowing where they fit into the business, and the confidence that they're executing what they're supposed to be executing. So again, I'm gonna hammer back on standards, something like mission, vision, and goals, and, like,
Mhm.
the people that understand the mission and understand their role in that mission are always going to be more successful. The ones that kind of flounder are they're unclear what their purpose is, and they're not really sure, like, what actions they're supposed to be taking, yet they're still receiving their pay.
Right. And I would
Um,
also add if I would add almost an attitude, like, just having that right attitude. And I've been to restaurants before where my server's been absolutely amazing. And I'm just like, how happy are you?
right,
Working till 2 a.m.
right.
Let me poach this guy.
So it's it to answer your question a different way. It's easier to identify the things that are going to lead to failure.
Yeah.
And control is one of those things that, as a regional property manager, and I've seen it also, in some of the partner relationships we have at Chadwell Supply, it's when you interact with a leader, whether it's a property manager, a regional property manager, and there's this excessive need to control
Hmm.
like, oh, you can't have access to me, or I can't give that information to you. Like, look, we're not passing, like national defense secrets here. There's if
Right.
you're leasing apartments, I'm bringing you light bulbs and battery.
Right.
It, for you to treat me like I can't have access to you, or like you're this super secret squirrel thing going on, some ninja that, like, that's usually a good indication to me that there's going to be an issue there, right?
Sure.
You're gripping your business so hard and don't want anyone to look into it because there's a hide going on.
Yeah.
And that's an insecurity that, again, like, there's no teamwork, there's no family environment, there's no culture. That culture of the business is a really, really important piece. That tone
Absolutely.
is set. It's set at the top, but it's supported all the way through the business. And, you know, they, you've got to pay attention to that.
Absolutely. I would agree. So, in your career, you've done multifamily, you've owned your own business, you have a military background. In those experience, what have you learned about leading strong teams?
Um, well, strong teams are tough, right? A lot of personalities. There's still you I feel like this we're just kind of repeating back to that vision and mission, but in a word, and everyone says it, right?
Mhm.
Communication.
Right.
When like in the military, we'd have missions or what, even in training, we'd have these after action reviews. So everybody get together afterwards, and we would like powwow about like what was good, what needs improvement, and you always wanted to participate, right? You know, I'm always so the kind of the game in the after action review was be who's the first person that gets to say communication because it's an easy improvement.
Mhm.
It can constantly be improved.
Mhm.
And in all levels of teamwork, in all levels of business, in all industries, there's always an evaluation of communication that has to happen. The problem with communication is we all think we're good communicators,
Right.
right? I mean, and you said it like, and my experience like overseas, we had our platoon leaders that were working with interpreters or even not with interpreters. And you'd have to stop and tell the platoon leader, like, sir, just because you say it louder and move your hands a lot doesn't help this person that doesn't speak your language understand what you're saying.
Right. And that's
And
always the example I give is when I don't understand something from my husband, I'll say, I don't understand. And he'll say the exact same thing, but louder. And I'm just like,
with
no,
big
I
hand
I
movements.
heard you. I didn't understand you. So
Right.
there is a difference there. So yeah, I appreciate the
So the key in communication is not how you communicate, it's understanding how your communication is received.
correct.
So feedback is the most critical part of communication because we're always sending, and very rarely do we stop and evaluate the reception of that. How was it received? And so asking for feedback from the people that you're leading
Mhm.
is the key part of making you a successful leader.
Really good point. So, if there's a management team or a property team leader out there struggling to keep good people, adding in communication, but what other things would they would maybe want to consider or self-reflect on?
Well, again, it's tough. So I mean, there are some basic things like you've got to make sure that you're offering a salary that's competitive to what's being commanded in your area,
Right.
and understanding the cost of a bad hire is an important thing to layer in. So yes, you may be able to get like candidate B for a little bit lower price or cheaper pay than candidate A.
Mhm.
um, but if you make the wrong hire, the cost of replacement and the expense that you're going to drive through that bad hire is going to be way over what you would have paid for paying the right person. But understanding clearly what it is you need is important.
Mhm.
Like doing a needs and like you may think you need three maintenance technicians and a supervisor on this 400 unit property, right? We've classically used the example of like one maintenance person per 100 units. Um, but the age of your property, have you been renovated? Like you've got to evaluate the real needs of your community.
Mhm.
Maybe you don't need a another technician. Maybe there's a piece of technology that you can insert, or maybe there's things that you can do to contract out a level of work that you're leaning on your in-house staff to do. I had a community that I managed in Virginia, that small community. It was just at 100 units, and there were two technicians that worked on the property,
Mhm.
and one that had been there a long time, one that was relatively new. The relatively new one was much more skilled than the one that had been there a long time. And looking at callbacks, looking at quality work, I came on to like I really can get by with one technician. So I ended up selling happiness elsewhere to the other technician, um, and looked at the level of work, doubled the contracts that I had in my budget. So my doubled my HVAC contracts, my plumbing contracts, and contracted out HVAC install, water heater install, doubled miscellaneous, and I still at the end of the day came out better on the bottom line with outsourcing some of these repairs versus hiring another employee. So it's not always like put it back the way you found it may not necessarily be the right fix. So constantly evaluating like your operations and what your needs are, and then being honest with that sometimes could be a better solution.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time and your insight. Is there any other like final thoughts when it comes to team building or hiring that you think you'd want to share?
Um, it's again, we're just loaded with cliches in this one, but one mouth, two ears. Do a much better job listening more than directing, and help your team find their own way instead of like the autocratic like push into a path. Sometimes as a leader, we don't have the best ideas. Being open to understanding and hearing from the people in your team can often bring you better success than what you can find on your own.
Bert, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today and sharing your knowledge and insight with us. It was really great to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the MRO Show presented by Chadwell Supply. If you enjoyed this episode and found it useful, please rate us 5 stars on your favorite podcast service. You can also listen to more episodes at chadwellsupply.com/podcast.